Witchfire is a first-person shooter in a dark fantasy setting with roguelike elements, and it does say extraction shooter on the genre tags in the store page, but like not really. It sort of has elements of that. You need to find a way to get expeditions, and like you finish the mission or you just leave. There are porters you need to get to, but it isn't really much of an issue. There just really isn't a huge thing centered around it. I don't have a ton of experience with extraction shooters. I do know how like escaping from Tarkov works. Escape from Tarkov, escaping from, what I mean. And playing Division 1 and 2 Dark Zones both have said things that you need to get yourself to escape, which has real dangers. Tarkov has set escape areas, which can be easily camped and often are, and you can just pretty easily just die and lose basically everything. So, that it is a constant risk. And Dark Zone, same thing, constant risk. You can lose whatever you're carrying. And in order to extract of anything, you need to shoot a flare off that shouts, "Hey, look at me, I'm over here extracting," and just hope you don't get torn a new one by some roving band of rogues. The worst that can happen to you is that you lose a Witchfire you are carrying, which is the currency of the game, which you'll spend to level up, along with the treasures you carry, which is convert to gold when you extract, which you spend on getting new gear, and some stuff you buy from the merchant you eventually unlock. You can very easily just pick it after up you die, make a beeline to it, and you'll be good. If you do die again after picking up your stuff, you can just kind of die in an area that's a lot easier to get to, and it's just, yeah, not really much of a not really focused around it, not really like a huge issue. So like, yeah, you technically extract, but I don't really consider like extracting shooter. For the roguelike elements, it actually has like a bit more to it. I don't consider like a proper roguelike anyway, but like, it does have like a random set of buffs you can get after clearing a certain group of enemies from these crystal appeal called manifestations. And it's nice to get like a random set of bonuses. It makes your runs a little bit more different, although you can control which ones you get to like a good amount with prophecies, and you can set what like category of buffs you get in a certain order, which makes things like a bit more controlled, and it feels more like you're just kind of adding to your build than most of like a roguelike. It also has a nice thing that if you have gear with elements, it will then cycle elemental buffs into that thing, which is nice because I don't know, but I feel like a lot of games will do things where it will have like buffs or things that you just don't have yet or aren't using. So it's nice that it only appears when you actually have that element to actually make use of that buff, which is a nice little thing. The guns are pretty well designed. The reloads, the visuals, everything feels really nice. I think they all have cool sort of gimmicks or things they could do, and in particular, some of the sound design for the guns are just really good. There's a gun called Hangfire, which when you reload, just makes this really nice, strong, just metallic, like crunch sound. It's just like a really solid, just boom. Like it just, it scratches that part of my brain that I can't really fully describe. But when I'm talking to someone about it, like you get it, you understand. There's also a gun called Hunger, which its perk is when you get critical headshots, you'll get a charged bullet. When you reload based off of how many critical headshots you got, and you actually can see the charged bullet in the chamber. Just little details like that that really add, a nice little touch to the experience. There's also a story which explains in the opening that witchcraft is heresy, and we are at war with the witches and her forces. Although it turns out battling semi-immortal creatures with mystical powers able to materialize out of thin air is a little hard just for like a normal ass dude, or at least I assume that's the reason. Which I cannot stress like how clever of a name this is. You are a prayer, as in prayer like hunting, but also prayer as in like prayer. It fits the setting so well, and it's nice too because normally in a story or whatnot, when there's a group of super soldiers or some sort of like order or whatever, the name is kind of generic, and not to be like it's like, oh, come up with a better name like Destiny Guardians or whatever. Like it's fine, like it does a job, but like this prayer, like just like it just gives a nice extra flavor. Like that, I don't know, like something like that just really makes me enjoy the game way more, even though it's a fairly small, like it's a pretty small details. I haven't like really gonna impact gameplay that much, but just like the fact like, oh yeah, I'm a prayer, you can really get into like the universe of the game and the feel and the vibe. But yeah, anyway, you're basically a witch now, which normally is a bad thing, but I don't know, the Pope said it was cool, so seemingly all good. It also says you're immortal, although I think based on the fallen prayer shards you can get by collecting like pieces of the mask, it seems like not fully immortal, but like the spirit of the prayer never dies, but the body can or something. It does have a little lore tidbit in the menu about this can why prayers wear the mask. So probably something that will be revealed more as the game goes on. Anyway, the aesthetic of the game is on point. Oh, I mean, in my non-biased opinion, anything classic or like high gothic architecture with like Victorian style clothing and stuff like that, or like medieval looking stuff, it's like you can't mess that aesthetic up. Like it's really hard to not make that look good. The gameplay also feels really nice. If you play Destiny, it feels somewhat similar to that, but like decently faster. Also, side note, if you do play the game, level endurance, since movement is what's going to be keeping you alive. This gives you, of course, understandably, more stamina, regen, and dash distance. Everything else is really not as important, particularly because you lose stamina when you get hit, and it can actually reduce your max amount. And staying out of the way of melee enemies and dodging shots will be very important. It's also nice to be able to traverse around the maps faster. It also has a good like triple A feel. Normally, at least in my experience, when it's a more of like an indie title, the gunplay and movement can feel a bit off, unless it's like purely focused on being a shooter. But it felt really nice, really smooth. The just everything in general just feels good and complete for the content that is there. The exploration of the levels is good, just going around exploring around the looks, little nooks and crannies and all of that. Each level as you unlock it gets bigger and somewhat random to what spawns, so it will be a little different each time as it would be different events or things you can interact with. There's also the stuff hidden behind the gun, I think pronounced gnosis. That's what I think it's pronounced. Something you level up over time, which makes the game gradually harder, and then you get to see more stuff like that you actually wouldn't normally see otherwise, and some pathways that you can only interact with if you have a high enough level. Now, there are some negatives I have for the game, although this isn't like the biggest deal since it's early access, and it does seem at the time writing this that new update is like a month or two out. And well, for $40, the price is just a bit steep for the current content. Everything here feels really solid, but it's just not really enough for the $40 price. Like I feel sitting about 20 hours and pretty much everything done. I mean, there's like some gear I can get to upgrade and collect more prey echoes, but like at max, maybe 5 more hours of that. And that's usually the stuff that's a little bit more boring because that's the most grinding part of the game. Which also, nice thing too is the game actually isn't very grindy. That's what probably has me do because I do like to use the 1 hour for $1 per like gameplay metric, which isn't a great one, but something to use. It's just like kind of look at to get some sort of value out of the game. And with nature of this game, it particularly when you look at other games comparatively like it, when I say like something like Destiny has a looter shooter fear, usually progression takes a lot longer, and this game actually happens pretty quick. Even when I was playing the game, it felt like when I was doing like a 20-minute mission, I thought like maybe I was playing for an hour, but just because usually I'm used to things just taking a lot longer in games like this. So, this is kind of like a mixed point and something that'll be solved as time goes on because it's early access. It's kind of a nature of just the current state of the game. Although I do think just for the current content, it is a little steep for the price. Although probably soon enough to be remedied because as the levels come out, like each level progressively is getting bigger. So I imagine the next one is going to be even larger than the last one. So the bosses I think I say the bosses is only two, and it's really just the second one can use a bit of work. The first one you face is pretty good, but the second one is just not very frightening, moves very telegraphed. I think visually isn't as interesting as the first one, and the arena until you fight it in makes it really easy to dodge its moves because you just can hide behind the pillars. It just really isn't in your face or aggressive enough. Like it does a sort of swing wave attack thing that's very slow, easy to dodge. Meanwhile, the first boss you face has multiple tracking moves, will like do artillery shots in the sky, all these things, and just generally is way more of a threat and like keeps you on your toes and keeps you moving. The second one is just a little of a snooze fest, which is a little disappointing. I like these little work. And the whole thing is, for a game like this, I usually expect a soundtrack to be a little bit more, just more. I want my choir. I want more just my orchestra. I can't say the correct word. Like more of a just grand sound. Like I don't know, something that's just a little more I'm trying to think of the word orchestral, like you know what I mean. I'm not good for words, but you're smart though. You probably know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I do think the soundtrack can use a bit of work. It does its job. It's fine. It fits the mood of the game, but it just doesn't really give me that oomph. That really strong battle music, particularly when you're fighting some bosses, which is a little disappointing. I would like to see that improved, but other than that, it's really solid. Seemingly going to get more content soon, which addresses really my main gameplay. And each level does progressively get bigger, so I'm assuming the next one will be even bigger than the last. I don't know why I said that again. That's how logic works. The gunplay feels really nice, and the movement feels great. It moves at a nice pace, not grindy. Of course, the aesthetic is just I absolutely adore. And if you'll find the content being a little light right now, and you look for a nice single player experience, then I recommend Witchfire.